It's so early. I'm your host, Will Shelkoff, author of The Bitcoin Dog, following the Descent to the C++ source code, and contributor to Bitcoin Magazine. You can save 10% on your tickets to Bitcoin Conference 2023 with my promo code Bitcoin Dog, all caps. If you enjoy the show, please like, comment, and subscribe. My guest today is actually a returning guest, fellow podcaster and Bitcoin Magazine contributor, Ian Reis. Ian, great to have you back on.
Great to be back on.
So yeah, what are we talking about today?
So the last time we spoke, we were talking about an article that I had written. And since then, I've actually done some software development and I built a little app or calculator for the Bitcoin community to help people kind of train their brains to think and save in terms of Bitcoin.
All right, that's pretty cool. I think there is a huge concept of unit bias or unit of account, or Bitcoiners who have determined it's important to save and preserve their wealth in Bitcoin, but their mindset is still, even saving in Bitcoin is not good enough if it's still done in fiat terms. I think that's the thing you're getting at.
Yeah, and the calculator, I think, the app, that I built, I think it kind of points that out to people more obviously than just trying to like verbally explain it to them. Because it's a very unique train of thought that most people don't think because their checking account is in dollars.
All right. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the verbal explanation of your calculator, listening to your Flirting with Bitcoin podcast, flirting with your wife talking about Bitcoin. But sure, on my Bitcoin podcast, It's So Early, let's debut it in a video format. So I will share my screen to your website. Okay, can you see the website on the video?
Yep.
Great. So this is, for those who are listening, goals.flirtingwithbitcoin.com. And Ian, please tell us what we're seeing on the welcome page.
Yeah, so when I first started sharing this around with like friends and family, they still didn't really understand like why would I even create a thing like this? Obviously, saving is easy. And so from a lot of their questions and comments, I kind of put this welcome screen to kind of make the case one more time of why you should be using this calculator if you want to reach your savings goals.
Yeah, and in particular, you're featuring a quote to welcome people to the calculator. The quote reads, "A goal is not always meant to be reached. It often serves simply as something to aim at." Bruce Lee. What do you think that quote means to you?
So, when I was putting this like welcome screen together, I just did like a random search for like goals,
Oh, come on.
like a
You didn't take a
no,
chance to do some meaningful quote.
no, hear me out, hear me out.
Okay.
So I did a random search for like goal quotes. And this is actually a thing that my dad has said to me multiple times. So when I saw this quote, I was like, yeah, that's the quote I want to use. I did get it in the search results, but it is a thing that we kind of have said to each other in my life.
Okay, there you go. So there is meaning and significance, rest in peace, Bruce Lee. And yeah, in particular, it sounds like you're advocating for Bitcoiners to try saving in Strike or Swan. I think you do on purpose endorse those two products. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I've endorsed them multiple times on our podcast.
Mm.
They're basically Bitcoin only exchanges, as opposed to Coinbase, who's like a, you know, casino, as we like to call them. Um, but Bitcoin and Swan are the leaders of those companies are also pretty really hardcore Bitcoiners, and so I like to support people who are down for Bitcoin and not for crypto and scams and stuff like that.
Okay, I love it. You've got a clear path forward. You've got a motivational quote for why we're even using the calculator. And, the calculator is not the destination. It's just another tool in the journey towards Zach and Sats. So let's get started.
let's get started.
Mhm. Okay, so here's the calculator. Um, I like that you have it written right at the top. 100 million Satoshis equals 1 Bitcoin. First is to enter my goal to stack. So what do you think? What should be our first goal?
Well, I really think that most people should start with 1 Bitcoin. As the quote said, like even if you're not going to get there, having that goal, I think if you're going to be a Bitcoiner, you should strive for 1 Bitcoin, right? So we've defaulted you to 1 Bitcoin. And I think that's like the default case for most people coming in.
Great. And so this calculator is truly meant for beginners. Is that right?
Yeah, I think this calculator is meant
I
for
guess
beginners.
anyone. Sorry. Yeah, it's beginner friendly. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beginner friendly.
Mm.
But I do think that it also is for people who probably have been stacking for a while and really probably don't have a goal. And so this calculator would actually serve those people well also because well what is your goal? Like have you hit it or are you just always throwing money into a void and just saying stack as much as possible?
Mhm.
I personally believe goals are very important.
So for our first calculation, we'll leave the goal as 100 million Satoshis. Shall we assume we've already stacked 0 Satoshis?
Brand new person.
All right. And when it's time to determine when to reach our goal, it's important to have goals be time bound. The options are actually all associated with the halvings 2024, 28, 32, and 36. What motivated the design decision to have the goals be based off of the halving estimated time?
So one of the things that we try to I don't want to say force. One of the things we try to reinforce on our podcast is a lot of the Bitcoin culture and lingo and concepts. And so the halving is a very important concept to Bitcoin, and it's a very important time in the Bitcoin universe. You know, it's almost like the equivalent of US presidential elections, right? It happens every 4 years. Everyone's talking about it leading up to it, and then everyone talks about it after it happens, right? Like it's this big inflection point in the Bitcoin community. And so I think having the goals time bound to that, knowing that at the halving every 4 years, the subsidy on mining a block is cut in half, hence the name the halving. Um, I think that knowing that the subsidy is getting cut in half, that should be when you want to reach your next goal. And this is an opinionated design decision. Obviously, in future versions, we'll have you the ability to add a custom date. But I think for getting this out the door, I think the halvings are a very important part of Bitcoin.
No, I appreciate your personal flair, personal touch on this calculator. It's not meant to just be a typical boring calculator. As you say, the intent is to get your mindset off of fiat and onto a Satoshi standard, and thinking about savings goals, not just by the regular calendar years, but by the Bitcoin calendar and its halvings. Um, I mean, I see people on Twitter even they try to say that they're going to host a 2 hour Twitter space, but instead they call it a 12 block space because, on average, each Bitcoin block gets mined every 10 minutes. 12 times 10 is 120 minutes, 2 hours. So it's just, it's just fun. All these little culture clever things. Great. And shall we stack once every week?
Yeah, I think weekly is a good starting point for most people starting out.
All right. And then it's funny. I I love to say stack sats, stay humble. That's what I like to say. But I wonder if it's supposed to be the reverse. Like, for first stack a mountain of sats, like 10 billion Satoshis, and then stay humble. As opposed to be humble first and then stack sats. Like, no, I'll be humble once I've got my giant wallet of Satoshi. So funny, but I say it that way too. That's how I say it. Okay, let's set the goal. Okay, what am I seeing?
Right. So one of the things I think about calculators, savings calculators, whether it's an IRA or just a regular savings account, is that it comes out in like spreadsheet form, when they're showing you the progress that you're going to make. And I feel like people already are not that financially literate, right? And so giving them a spreadsheet showing them how their wealth is going to grow is probably not going to land with them. But I have found in my other job, in my real job as a software engineer, that people tend to do better with prose, right? So if you can work the information that you're trying to give them into prose, then it's repeatable for them when they think about it later. And so that's the design decision that we made here, for kind of conveying what's going to happen based on your goals, and dates and interval that you set. So in this case, and I'm just going to read it out loud because it reads like prose, right? So in this case, in order to reach your goal of 1 Bitcoin by the 2024 halving, you need to stack approximately 1.1 million Satoshis every week for the next 86 weeks, right? And that concept right there is how to save in Bitcoin. And so the next paragraph that says at current exchange rates, $4,976 or 4,972 Satoshis for $1 means that you need to exchange at least $233 to Bitcoin if you haven't stacked for the week yet, right? And so the idea there being this is an app that you can come back to. We don't save anything in a database. The four
What? It
values that you
changed.
right, and so
What?
the four values that you entered are saved local storage in your browser. But the exchange rate, that pricing information, that's API from Strike. So every 10 seconds, it's going to change if the exchange rate has changed.
Wow,
And so
this
the idea, so, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this is incredible, Ian, because I think I just listened to your podcast, and it sounds like you've made an improvement to the calculator since that recording.
Yeah, I got a little bit of feedback from Twitter people, and it's not a big complicated app, so it's very easy for me to like make some tweaks. Since I guess yesterday, I made them last night.
Like you said, you've got that Bitcoiner obsession to just throw yourself into your work. So yeah, I think if you could just repeat it one more time, I think you explained on the podcast the best way to use this calculator for your savings goals, given that the exchange rate for Satoshis will fluctuate over the next 86 weeks.
Right. So, it's not good enough to just go into Swan or Strike and set a DCA auto buy, right? Like that's a great start. But again, if you had a goal, the fluctuation in the exchange rate means that once you set that auto buy, once the price starts changing, you're not going to get the same amount of Satoshis every time that auto buy goes off. And so, in order to reach your goal, you need to be exchanging the correct amount of fiat at every interval, not a set amount of fiat at every interval. And so, this app is really just trying to show you that in real time, right? Like, as we're talking, the price has changed. And so, if you had bought 5 seconds ago versus 10 seconds from now, the number of Satoshis you're going to get is different. And so, the idea being here, if you were to come back to this app at your regular interval, it'll always give you the correct price to buy for that interval.
I think it's a really powerful concept what you've done here. The Satoshi savings calculator, rather than dollar cost average, more like Satoshi cost average. I mean, that's ultimately what you're saying is because what's the number that's not changing on my screen? It's the 1.1 million Satoshis to stack every week. That's the
Exactly.
fixed amount. That's the one. So, currently Strike or Swan, they have DCAs, but the unit of count, even on those Bitcoin services, is dollars. You're setting your savings goal in dollars. Um, Keep the Satoshi savings goal constant. And of course, as long as you can afford it, update that dollar amount you're exchanging into Satoshis on the week.
Exactly. And so but you just said like if it's not too much. And so let's just assume that, $233 a week is too much for you, right? So you can just hit modify goal right there, and let's go back and just give ourselves some more time, and maybe we're going to the 2028 halving, right? So that's 4 more years, and I'm pretty sure it's going to get cut in half, right? But there you go, $68 a week. $68 a week. Like that, you can drive Uber and get $68 a week, at least in America. In America. But my point there being like, if someone was thinking in those terms, okay, I got to make $68 a week for the next 295 weeks, that mindset, you're actually not going to get to that one Bitcoin, right? Because we know the price is going to change over the next 295 weeks. So giving people the chance to stay on task or to stay on goal by whenever you load this page, whatever goal you set, it's going to tell you this is what you need to buy for this current interval.
To hit that Satoshi stacking goal. And as you
Exactly.
say, as Bruce Lee says, even if you can't hit the goal, having that goal oriented mindset to strive as much as you can to reach it, that's the rewarding thing. Let's have some fun. So, do you have some other examples for us to enter into the calculator?
Well, I mean, so on our podcast, when I was like explaining this concept to my wife, I always use this scenario about Kanye West, right?
Your
And
favorite.
so yeah, Kanye is like he's my favorite crazy person, right? Um, so Kanye for a while has like been arguing with like the Forbes list, right? He's been arguing that I'm a billionaire, I'm a billionaire. They're not counting my different assets, they're not valuing me correctly, right? Okay, Kanye, buy Bitcoin, right? You could be a billionaire in Bitcoin. Do you have a billion Satoshis, Kanye? Right? Because if you have a billion Satoshis, that's very easily verifiable, right? You can just show everyone your address. Boom, we all see you have a billion. So I would argue that let's try to get a billion Satoshis, which is one more zero,
Let's do
right?
it. One more
Yeah.
zero. There we go.
Yeah. So set goal and uh I mean
When does
Kanye can go to
Kanye want
20,
to buy?
yeah. Yeah, Kanye wants it soon. He doesn't
And he's got nothing. And he stacks once a week, or what does Kanye do?
I think Kanye stacks I think he stacks quarterly. I don't think uh he's DCAing from his phone on a daily basis.
If he
But
remembers,
even
once a quarter, starting from nothing, 2024. Shall we see how much Jesus needs to stack?
let's see. There you go, Kanye. $33,000. Do you have $33,000, Kanye? Because
Is
you're
it a question?
right? Because you're only 6 quarters away from being a billionaire.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going.
I'm just saying, like, so he's having this argument with, like, kind of begging the fiat world to give him that label of a billionaire, right? That's basically what he was doing. He was making his case for why he should have it, but he was basically begging to be called a billionaire. And in Bitcoin world, you don't have to do that, right? Like, you just have what you have, and if you want to prove that you have it, you show it to everybody. That's it. And so, yeah, I think Kanye is like the most extreme example of that. But I think how we measure wealth is slowly changing to where, Kanye wants to be a billionaire, but like, how come the number of billionaires keeps increasing? Right? Like, you're only going to have so many Bitcoin billionaires. That's the difference, Kanye.
At most, if it was evenly distributed, there would be 2.1 million Bitcoin billionaires or Satoshi billionaires, I think. Because if I did 21 million, just move 1 0.
I'm going to say that math.
We didn't do that math ahead of time.
Yeah, we didn't do that math ahead of time.
But
But
I love this calculator. I love the power of the three commas. Like there it is, a billion satoshis, three commas. If you want that third comma, if the price of Bitcoin stays the same, it's 6 easy payments of $33,000 for Kanye to get there.
exactly.
This
And
No, I was just gonna say this is intended to be a Bitcoin only podcast, but I could totally see him doing the opposite and spending $400,000 on a Bored Ape NFT or something. And it's like, no, that is, oh wow, just talk about missing the mark.
yeah, so uh Kanye aside, I think this idea of like, on our podcast, we talk about Bitcoin Island, right? We like to talk about Bitcoin as an island. At the top of the show, we say like you can buy, 4,900 acres for $1. You can get 4,900 Satoshis for $1, right? That's how we try to refer to Bitcoin on our podcast, right? Well, on that island also, everyone's wealth is verifiable, right? If you want to verify it. But at the same time, your wealth um is more real because it's a fixed supply, and when you have $10,000 in your bank account and I don't, and then I go borrow $10,000, our bank accounts look equal, but they're not. In Bitcoin world, that can't happen.
No, that's right. Did you have another example you wanted to do on the calculator?
I mean, I feel like people really would get a better idea of it by playing with it for themselves. So again, like go to goals.flirtingwithbitcoin.com. And again, none of your information is saved anywhere other than in the browser. And if you care more about security, like turn on airplane mode, it all still works. It doesn't need any outside connection. You won't get the price pulls from Strike because you don't have, the Wi-Fi on or whatever, but it doesn't vary that much as you're like playing with it, right? Unless Twitter starts blowing up saying that Bitcoin's crashing.
Yeah. No, that's
then you
right.
might want to then you might want to turn your Wi-Fi back on.
Yeah, I appreciate that privacy, to say, hey, if you do want to set your input your current stack, without tying your IP address to, something you entered on the flirting with Bitcoin savings calculator, because that's something definitely tracked, right? No, I'm just kidding. But you could do airplane mode, and then on the flip side, if you're not concerned about that, or if you have zero anyway, and it's no secret that you don't have any. I like that automatic update on the calculator of the price. That's a neat feature. The other thing I saw at the bottom was pretty exciting to me is you have a link to support the developer hashtag value for value.
Yeah, so we run our podcast on Fountain, which is a Bitcoin Lightning payments podcasting platform. And we've been promoting our podcast as a value for value. So basically, what that means is if you get any value from the content that we created and now the app that we've developed, like if it's produced any value for you, we ask that you just give whatever you feel it was worth to you. And that's how we run our podcast, and that's how we're going to run basically the development of the calculator as well. I'm the developer of the calculator. The link goes out to Strike, so it's a Strike link. You punch in a dollar amount, but it'll flash you a QR code. So when you scan it, like you can pay in Bitcoin if you want.
Cool. And I saw you had a link to an exchange called Amber. I haven't heard of that one. What is Amber?
So Amber is an exchange, Bitcoin only exchange that was started in Australia, I believe. One of the Bitcoin community people that's he's pretty popular in Bitcoin space, Alexander Svetsky. I believe he started that company. Um, and that's how I found out about it. I read one of his papers on Bitcoin Magazine, and in it he like mentioned Amber, and that's how I first heard about them. But Amber is really cool because Amber, they have like DCAing and auto buying, right? But it's cool because they have a couple of like, you got to be in the Bitcoin community to really get it. So they have one that's called Buy the Schiff. So basically, anytime Peter Schiff would tweet about Bitcoin, you can set aside like a dollar amount of money, and Amber will like automatically buy it like anytime Peter Schiff would tweet. So that was kind of cool. And they got a couple other ones, that are kind of Bitcoin community specific reasons for buying, that like Strike and Swan just don't offer those things. And so if you're trying to like be more into the culture, I feel like Amber's deeper into the culture when it comes to certain parts of the Bitcoin community.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really interesting. These are all things to increase engagement for saving in Satoshis. And I think um, it kind of goes both ways, where you're encouraging people to save, whether it's in large amounts or small amounts. Hey, if it takes buy the Schiff as a fun little game gimmick to uh, get you like excited to, you know, add an emotional attachment to stacking sats and encourage you to stack just a little more, great. But also the calculator is really good because if your goal was 100 million Satoshis, that's a lot of Satoshis. That's not a small amount. And your calculator really shows how no, doing only 68 US dollars a week is probably not going to get you there, especially since the price will go up. So, you know, it is a nice reality check in that sense.
Exactly. And the other thing that I think is like eye-opening about the calculator is when you do break it down and say, that's 86 weeks away, or that's, 6 quarters away, right? Like people, I don't know if we have I don't know if we're even ready to start talking about people thinking in terms of like Bitcoin time, right? Like we can barely get them to think about in Bitcoin like units of money. But I do think there's another way of thinking about the world, which is in like Bitcoin units of time. So like blocks and epochs and errors and stuff like that of Bitcoin. Um, this is like a new way of thinking about almost everything. And like even building the calculator, I kind of learned some things about Bitcoin that I hadn't even really noticed, which is like, oh, like there is like this time component that, oh, that's too much. I can't start using like in like 27 blocks away. Like, I can't do that yet because they're not here for that. But I do think that there will be in the future, and probably a lot faster than we think, there will be that next conversation in the Bitcoin community about, are we going to start having like Bitcoin units of time that we always reference as well? Just like we're arguing about, is it bit or Satoshi, right?
No one's arguing bit. I haven't heard. I mean, maybe that was a thing to call it millibits for a second, but no, Sats definitely won that battle. So something I just thought of right now while talking to you, you're a software engineer. You're familiar with agile software development. You're familiar, even if you don't practice it, you're familiar with the concept of 2 week sprints. To write software. That's what Bitcoin has. Bitcoin has a 2 week difficulty adjustment. Every 14
Exactly.
days, the difficulty adjusts, and that's in the news in the Bitcoin universe. Is it was too easy to mine blocks this past 2 week difficulty adjustment period. Too many too many miners were online, getting fired up to hash more. So no one's controlling the network, just the protocol and the nodes, and they're going to increase the difficulty almost 10% going into the next two
Oh,
week
wow.
difficulty adjustment epoch. Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean,
I
10%.
did not see that.
Yeah. So just thinking about that concept of time and Bitcoin time and organizing your life into 2 week sprints. Bitcoin is the same way. If you're a miner, you're about, if you don't step up your game, you're about to get 10% less revenue because it's 10% harder to mine the next block. So yeah, so that's just like another way to think about time. Of course, stacking sats for savings is separate from that a little bit because we're just procuring sats. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think time is the next big one for Bitcoin. I don't know when we're gonna see all the philosophers come out and give us, their outline on it, but time is a very important part.
You're going to stop measuring your age in revolutions around the sun or orbits around the sun, but instead in Bitcoin halvings. It's pretty funny. So the other thing I was going to say about Peter Schiff is he clearly loves his son a lot. I know Peter Schiff's son is a Bitcoiner. His son is absolutely taking the orange pill. So, and he's pretty vocal as well. And Peter knows that him and his son absolutely do not see eye to eye whatsoever on Bitcoin. And the funniest part of the whole thing to me is, Peter Schiff, this is the changing of the guard. Can you not see it? Can you have the hubris and humility to recognize in the next generation, starting with your own son, people will see Bitcoin or Satoshis as the hard asset to store your savings and store your wealth as opposed to gold. The examples right there. But regardless, I'm grateful that it hasn't made a schism for him and his relationship with his son. It seems like, at least on Twitter, I don't know personally, but on Twitter, they seem to have a loving relationship. So
I'm sure they're doing great.
with enough gold and enough Bitcoin, that'll hopefully. Well, actually, no. Who knows? I mean, there's plenty of billionaires that still complain that they're not on the Forbes list and they obsess over it. So, or sorry, I guess they're not billionaires. Never mind. I'm just kidding. I want to give you a chance for a final word before we wrap up the show.
Yeah. So this calculator is actually one of the first ideas that I ever had when I first came to the Bitcoin space. And I was looking at all the different things that existed, and I really felt like this didn't exist. This thing's been in my head for like 2 years almost, and it's been very uh, heartwarming to see the response that it's gotten from the few people that I've shared it with, and then the random people that are like messaging me on Twitter. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's like critiqued it and gave any feedback about it. I'm just so excited this is like actually out in the world for the Bitcoiners. I'm glad that I could like use my software engineering skills to put something in the community. Um, I don't think I'll be committing any code to Bitcoin Core anytime soon, but I do want to do my part, and hopefully this is like one step in like a multi-step process of like actually putting some tools into the Bitcoin community.
Cool. And what would you say to anyone who thinks it's too late to start saving in Bitcoin?
I would tell them we're still so early.
You heard it again from Ian, second time on the show. Ian says it's so early. All right. Thanks, Ian, for coming on and sharing your calculator.
Thanks for having me again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait.